Good morning, everyone. Today I wanted to talk to you about crows to kind of expand this bird series that we're doing here so we can learn about all the different birds we have around us. Now, of course, we're not going to get into all the birds, but there are two, the California scrub jay and the crow, that are both super easy to spot and that are super abundant and active on our school grounds and probably in your neighborhoods as well. So I hope that you know what a crow is, but just in case you don't, a crow is going to be a bird that's about this big, maybe the size of like a teddy bear, and it's going to be jet black. So black beak, black eyes, all black feathers, black feet, like the entire crow is black. And here are some pictures of crows, just in case you don't know. So crows are really cool birds. They are like specifically super intelligent and super social. So they live in these like pretty complex social groups, kind of like how humans do, right? We have families and then we have friends and then we have communities. Well, crows have the same thing. So a lot of birds will, live on their own or live with a couple other birds, but just like, we see penguins in these big expanses, we also see crows in these big expansive groups. So when they're all kind of nesting together or sleeping in a cold winter's night, all huddled together, they're called a roost. And generally speaking, a female crow and a male crow will mate for life, meaning that it's kind of like they're getting married and then they stay that way for their whole lives. And they generally do this at like 2-ish years of age, sometimes later though. And when they pair up for life, they're going to be laying eggs together. So they'll generally lay what is called like a brood, which is like a set of eggs, once, maybe twice a year. And what's really cool is that their babies, right, from past broods will often stick around for a while, right, because they're creating this complex social system that's like extended family. And those young crows that are not yet in a mated pair are called juveniles, right, like young kids or like teenager crows. And they will often protect the nest with baby crows from predators, and or they'll come and like feed the baby crows, which is just so cool, like having like these big really helpful siblings. A couple years back, I was on the playground and we heard this huge commotion. It was an aftercare, huge commotion in the sky. I'm like, what is going on? We look up and we see this red-tailed hawk just doing its like right. No, that was a crow, like super high pitched call sound. And these crows, there's like maybe 4 or 5 of them, were just chasing after this red-tailed hawk. And we watched it for maybe an hour, just going back and forth, and the red-tailed hawk would, swoop to the right and then cut really fast to the left and go double back. And it was clear that this red-tailed hawk was trying to go to this crow's nest and maybe eat the babies, which is rude. But red-tailed hawks have to eat too. But these juvenile crows were like, no, you don't get to eat our siblings or our community members. And they chased after this red-tailed hawk. And this happens all the time. They protect their nests and they protect their greater community, which is like really cool and really advanced. So when I say crows are smart, they're like really smart. So let's put this in perspective. A crow's brain is small, right? It's a small creature. It's going to have a small brain. But compared to the overall weight of their body, it's about 2.7% of the bird's total weight. Okay, the crow's brain is 2.7% of the total body mass. Let's put that in perspective again. A human's brain is only about 1.95% of our body weight. 2.7 is more than 1.95, right? Let's round those. That's about 3% to 2%. 3 is more than 2. So their brains are bigger based on their body weight than ours are. Now, that doesn't mean that they are smarter than us, but it does show that they're pretty advanced, which is really cool. It's said that crows can remember faces of people, or, someone who comes into their space or their territory and is kind, they'll remember that person. Or someone who comes into their space and is unkind, they will also remember that person and may make it unpleasant for that person to be there. And it's really interesting because they can perceive sensory input rather than just process it like most animals. And what I mean by this is if a crow were to get injured in some way, or if a community member crow got injured, they would be able to perceive it as an injury and learn from it, or look at the injury and say, how can I fix this, rather than just go injury and move on. Whereas a lot of animals don't really take that injury and do something with it or learn from it. It's really interesting how they can perceive these sensory inputs and then learn from it. So another example is they can use tools. They can be trained to use tools like dogs, right? But they've also seen them use tools or learn from their environment to benefit themselves. So I'm going to also send this video of a crow using tools, a series of pretty complex steps to get food. And now this crow has been trained on each of the individual steps, but has never done it all together, and it's presented with all these tools and these obstacles, and it's able to figure it out, and it's incredible. So that will be included here so you can really see, oh my gosh, crows are really smart. They are known to use these tools, which is virtually unheard of in animals except for the great apes like chimpanzees, orangutans, and humans, right? They also can learn from their environments to benefit themselves. So one example is there's stories of these crows in Japan, and I think crows in this area have learned things too, enough to benefit themselves. But I like this story specifically. The crows have these nuts, and they're really hard to crack. Their beaks are not suited for these nuts, but they know that there's delicious food inside this hard shell. So they don't know how to crack it. So what they did is they learned the traffic lights. They learned when big trucks would be coming through, a green light, right? And they would drop all the nuts in the middle of the intersection. Watch for the green light. They would leave. The big trucks would come on through, right over the nuts, cracking the shells. And then when they see the red light, they swoop down and pick up the food. How smart is that? That's incredible that they figured this out and used it to their benefit. So crows there's about 40 different species of crows that inhabit every continent except for really Antarctica and South America. Now, sometimes the crow family kind of includes other birds that we wouldn't really necessarily be like, that's a crow. But for scientific purposes, I guess they're all under the same technical family. So crows are about this size. There are ravens, which are much bigger. Again, all jet black. Ravens are going to be just even smarter than crows, and they're really than what we would call the common crow. And they are just super big. So you can tell the difference between a crow and a raven, and you're like, that's a really big crow. Oh, it's probably a raven. Whereas on the other end, a jackdaw is going to be a tiny crow. And there's also another kind of species that's called a rook, but they look a little different, but they're still in the same family. Now, I want to play some crow calls for you. And this is super interesting because we all know a crow call is like caw, caw, right? And I'll play some for you in just a moment. But what I also didn't realize is that they have like regional dialects or accents, right? How people from different places in this country or different countries around the world have different accents. And so you can kind of tell, if you know enough about crows, where a crow is from based on the sound of their call. So I'm going to play a few from different areas. And it's actually really interesting to hear how, oh yeah, that one from Florida does sound different than that one from Oregon, or even the ones that we hear here. So one other thing that I want to mention before we get to the actual sound of the calls is maybe about a year or two ago, I was in the Seven Circles Garden, and I heard this really interesting little warbly call, and I didn't know what bird it was. And I finally figured out that it was coming from the eucalyptus tree, like right outside the front gate. So I went and I looked, and I saw a crow, and I was like, that's not that crow. That crow's not making that sound. That's not a sound crows make. And then I heard it again the next day and went back, and there was the crow. And I'm like, is it this crow making the sound? No. Surely. And then, a couple months passed, and then I heard it again, and I went back again. Right, it's a crow. At this point, I'm like, obviously, it's this crow making this sound. My first thought was, crows don't make that sound, right? They make the caw-caw sound. Like, they don't make this, like, sound. That's what it sounded like. I'll do it one more time. I was like, I'm confused. Maybe this crow doesn't know how to speak crow. And that was it. I had to go pick up a class, so I let it leave my brain. But then more recently, I've been hearing those calls again, and obviously it's crows. So I've been doing the call back to them, and they respond. And it's so sweet. And then I thought, well, obviously, the caw-caw is when we're seeing them in these big groups and it's loud, or they're kind of in these more dynamic situations. But when they're doing that sweet little sound, it's just like one in the tree, just kind of gently talking to its friends, just like as we would gently talk to each other if we were sitting close and having a nice little conversation. So I'm going to do my best to find a video of this cooing sound. Now, I found one that's not exactly what I'm expressing, but you can see it's a different sound than what we're used to hearing. So here are the sounds. Those are both crows from Florida. Here is a crow from California. The next sound is a cooing crow.